sing all two verses. All two. All two. All righty. Grab a hymn book. To a sweet, sweet spirit in this place. And I know that it's the spirit of the Lord. There are sweet expressions on each face. And I know that it's the presence of the Lord. Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet heavenly dove, stay right here with us, filling us with your love. And for these blessings, we lift our hearts in praise. Without a doubt, we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place. We'll sing that second verse, but how many of you can go back in your mind and remember when this song came out? Such a great song that came out. Look, it's written in 1962, copyrighted, but I think it really got into our churches, in the 70s maybe? But such a great song. That was in the development of what music is today, believe it or not. So let's sing that second verse. There are blessings you cannot receive till you know Him in His fullness and believe. You're the one to profit when you say, I am giving to Jesus all the way. Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet heavenly dove, stay right here with us, filling us with your love. And for these blessings, we lift our hearts in praise. Without a doubt, we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place. Amen. You may be seated. Brother Perry.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight to study God's Word together. Last week, if you remember, we ended up with the 15th verse, or at the 15th verse of the 26th chapter, and I want to kind of recap where we were, or where we are. Isaac has done something very similar to what his father did. He decided to leave where he was supposed to be and go where he wasn't supposed to be, and it didn't turn out very well. And he claimed his wife was his sister and made some folks very upset and angry with him, and just kind of caused some tension there. Have you ever noticed that when God's children, and that's you and me, when we find ourselves in a place where we shouldn't be, it oftentimes goes not so well for us? And that's something we need to think about, to not ever run ahead of God or lag behind Him, but just go where He leads. Now, things were going fairly well for Isaac, except the blessing of God was on him so greatly that he became very prosperous. And as his herds grew and his flocks grew and the numbers of people around him grew, that's where we ended up last week in verses 12, 13, and 14. There began to be some envy among the Philistines. I want to say a word about the Philistines before we go any further. At this time in their history, they had not moved inland very many years ago from being seamen on the Mediterranean Sea. In fact, they were still involved in that. And you will see the Philistines by the time of Saul and David, some several hundred years after where we're reading tonight. The Philistines had at that time become very much an antagonistic tribe of people or group of people against God's people. Now at this point where we're reading tonight, they're just folks. They're heathen people, and they don't really have anything against God's people, but there's just this friction here that we're about to read about. But by the time of David and Saul, many, many years later, they had become a real problem for God's people. So Isaac is down in the country of Gerar, where he was headed to Egypt, and he stopped off there as God told him to. And now here becomes the problem, beginning with verse 15. Now the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and they had filled them with earth. Now that was a serious thing. Why would that be such a serious thing in that country? There wasn't much water. They didn't get much rainfall, and there were very few streams and rivers and creeks as we would know them. And when you had a lot of animals, thousands of animals, and every one of them had to drink every day somewhere, a well was vital. It was vital. And even in our recent past in our country, when the West was being settled, there were many fights over water rights. And there still are some discussions and problems with water rights. But they had filled up Abraham's wells, the ones he had dug back earlier in his life. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you're much mightier than we." In other words, just get out of here. You're creating a problem between our herdsmen, your herdsmen. So then Isaac departed from there and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. He left, but he didn't go very far. He actually didn't go back to where he came from. He just went a few miles and stopped. So the problem did not end there. Isaac dug again the wells of water, which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father. So he had his servants go out and dig all this dirt and earth out of them and open them back up again. And the Philistines had stopped them up. Then he called them by name, which his father had called them. Also Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well of running water there. And that's very important, very important. You know, the well where it's so famous in God's Word, and we'll talk about it much as we go through Genesis, the same well that Jesus sat by outside that little Samaritan village where in John 4 the woman came out. That was a well that water ran. If you look down in it, the water was running. It was like an underground stream. And that's what they found here. This is very, very important. This is water that never stopped running. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the name of the well Esek, because they quarreled with him. Now that word means a quarrel or an argument. So he named the well after what had taken place there. So then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So he called its name Sitnah. And there is a word that means enmity, which has come between these people. They just keep pushing him and keep pushing him. So he called the name Sitnah, and he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. I guess he had moved on far enough to where they didn't feel pressured by him anymore. So he called its name Rehoboth, and that is so vitally important. Rehoboth. That's a beautiful word. That means there is space here. There's room to grow. There is the space that brings peace and quiet. They didn't feel closed in. For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. Then he went up from there to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, and here again, this is one of those places, if you mark in your Bible, that you can mark down the promise of God being given another time. Multiple times it's given. "Do not fear, for I'm with you. I'll bless you and multiply your descendants for my servant Abraham's sake." You know, God makes the same promise to us for Jesus' sake. Did you ever think about that? I think about that when I pray at home over our meals and stuff. My father always did that. He was the one that always prayed over the meal. Sometimes when our grandchildren are there, they ask the blessing over the food. Is that something y'all probably have done some? But my daddy always did that. There was never any question. And he always ended it, for Christ's sake. Amen. For Christ's sake. And that's what this verse reminds me of. The God of Abraham, the blessing that came from Abraham is the blessing in his sake that we have through Christ. Now, Abraham wasn't Christ, but Abraham to these people was like Christ is to us. He was the anchor. He was what God had sent to them to start them off. And Jesus is certainly our anchor and our salvation. So he built an altar there, verse 25 says, and he called on the name of the Lord, and he pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servant dug a well. Now he is kind of settled in here for a little while. Then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzath, one of his friends, and Philcol, the commander of his army. And again, we said last week, probably Abimelech and Philcol were terms for the president, the head of state, and then his commander of his army. It was a title more than the name of a person. And Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you? But they said, and this is a turn here, it's a very interesting turn, we have certainly seen that the Lord is with you. Notice that's all caps. That's not capital L, small O-R-D. That's capital L, and all the rest are capital. That means that these people recognize Jehovah God as being the all-powerful God. Don't you wish more people recognize that today? Oh, I do. Our world would be so much sweeter if people realized He is God and He is in control. So we said, let there now be an oath between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you that you will do us no harm, since we've not touched you and since we have done nothing to you but good and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. So this covenant is brought about between these two groups of people. They're not the same kind of people. They don't have the same values, perhaps, but there is peace between them. There's much to be said for us in that regard. You can find peaceableness in any situation if you'll just look for it. It's so much better to be agreeable than to be disagreeable. One of the hardest things in our culture today, and I think this is something that they were working on here, is to disagree without being disagreeable. Did you ever think about that? It is so difficult. That's something you have to work on, that you can have different ideas about things and not consider the other person worthless or unworthy because they don't agree with you about a certain thing. Now, verse 30, so he made them a feast. Now, Isaac has gone out of his way here. He's made them a feast, and they ate and drank, and then they arose early in the morning and swore an oath with one another. And Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. Now, the situation that we've looked at through this part of this chapter has gone from a bad situation, a tense situation where people could be in trouble, even lose their lives in fighting, to Isaac submitting, moving on forward, and then them appreciating the way he's acting and recognizing that he is truly a child of the Lord, the one and only. Our actions today, every day we live, should point people to Christ and not away from Him. It's so much better for us to be people that exhibit love and care rather than people that are hard-hearted and difficult. Now, this is an interesting part coming up here in the rest of this chapter. It came to pass, I'm in verse 32, the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, we have found water. So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of that city is Beersheba to this day. Did you ever wonder where it came from? That's where it came from, right here in the Bible. That is a very, very important thing. This is a well that relates to an oath that these people took together. They had a feast. They agreed on a situation. They departed in peace. They covenanted together to have peace. And that very day, his servants found water in that place. And they named that well Sheba, and that place Beersheba. And I'm sure if you had a Hebrew person here tonight, they would call that Beersheba, is what they would call it to this very day. Now, look at the author changes things here in verse 34. Brings up Esau again. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they were a grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah. Remember now, let's keep in mind, because that's where we're about to look. 2 sons were born at the same time. One was born before the other, and his name was Esau. And the second one came out holding his heel, and he was called the conniver, or the trickster, the heel grabber, for the rest of his life, actually, up until the time God really did a work on him and changed his name to Israel, which we'll look at in the future. But the author had to put this in here to set the stage for what's about to take place. He brings our mind back now from the travels that Isaac has made and the place where he is. Now, he's moved back up where he's supposed to be. He's in Beersheba now. And he's got his tent set there. And this is homeland. It's in the south, but it's homeland. And this boy, 40 years old, has taken to wife 2 women of Hittite people. Now, the Hittite people for hundreds of years were a thorn in the side of God's people. But this is where Esau's leaning. He is just a person that is just bent on creating heartache and misery. It just seems to be a part of his life. The blessing of God didn't fall on him, and he's sure living out that lack of promise. Now, chapter 27 is a story that probably everyone in this room has heard or has read many, many times. And it is a story of sadness, a story of deception, a story of brokenheartedness. And it reveals so much about all of the people involved in this story. So let's start in there and see where we go with this. Now, it came to pass when Isaac was old, and his eyes were so dim that he could not see, that he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered him, "Here I am," which would be a normal response if you were around a person whose vision had diminished to that point. Then he said, "Behold, now I'm old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Now, what is wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with it is the blessing of God is Jacob's. It's not Esau's. And Abraham knows that. He knows that. But this boy is a manly man to him. He has lived his whole life doing things that were considered manly things. And it's really important to him. And he is the firstborn. And Isaac is determined to see that the firstborn gets the blessing, even though he knows it is not to be. You remember last week when we had the little story about the stew and how he came in from the field and all that. And I mentioned, and I'll do it again here because this story bears this out. Jacob is going to try to trick his way into getting something that was already his. And Isaac can never have what he really wants, but he's going to do everything he can to get it. Isn't that a strange paradox? And I think oftentimes we do the same thing. How many times in your life have you just struggled and strained with something when God said, just have some peace in your life. Just let it go. We've done many studies, and Booney's preached about worry. And have you ever noticed that most everything you worry about never even takes place? And if it does, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. But we worry and we struggle and we strain. And that's what I see with these two boys. But look, they even enlist all of the members of the family. What a sad thing. Now, Rebekah was listening. Now, see, Jacob, I don't want to say he was kind of a mother's boy, but he had always stayed around home. He didn't go out and hunt and do things like that. I'm sure he took care of some of the things, his business things of his dad's and this, that, and the other. But he was more of a homebody. And being around home, he was around his mom a whole lot. And so we talked about favoritism last week. It's very possible that there is favoritism here. She was listening. I don't think she was eavesdropping. She was just around, and this conversation took place. When Isaac spoke to Esau, his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt game and to bring it. Now, those of you that do any hunting know that hunting with success is not always what takes place. So hunting is the act of going out to get something, and then killing and bringing it home is a whole different thing. So this could have been a lengthy period of time, several hours, maybe even overnight, that he was on this mission to hunt game and bring it in. So Rebekah had plenty of time for this plot that she's about to execute. When Rebekah was found by that well, by Eliezer back in there, didn't you have a picture of her as this sweet, precious, beautiful, innocent girl that just the apple of anyone's eye? And then she comes home to be Isaac's wife, and oh man, just Walt Disney said he'd just be happy ever after, wouldn't it? But it didn't turn out that way. Look at what she does here. She spoke to Jacob, her son, and saying, "Indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me game and make savory food," that's really tasty stuff, "for me, that I may eat it and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice according to what I command you. Go now to the flock and bring me from there 2 choice kids of the goats, and I will make savory food from them for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall take it to your father that he may eat it, and that he may bless you before his death." This woman is conniving. Isn't that something? And 2 little goats had to die for no reason. The blessing is already Isaac's. That's God ordained. But she's involved in trickery and deceit. If you look at that, you know, if you believe in inheritance, that may be where Jacob got his deceitfulness, is from his mom's side of the family. Boy, she's doing a thing here. And he goes along with it, but not without some reservation. Look at verse 11. "Esau, my brother's a hairy man, and I'm a smooth-skinned man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and that shall seem to be a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing." Here's a situation that you see a lot in our world today. Maybe even in your own life you've seen this before. It's not that you regret what you did that was wrong, it's you regret if you get caught. And there's a huge difference. You know, in our world today, and I won't linger on this point, there is such foolishness going on about dissolving or devaluing or defunding police departments around the country, that if that were to happen, you would see what they are holding down in our culture. That would boil up and boil over and just be a ruinous thing for all of us if there were no police. But he's kind of afraid of getting placed, but he's kind of afraid of getting caught. And that being afraid of getting doing some other things. And it should do the same way. How many of you have ever topped a hill and seen a state trooper and you lift your foot off, even if you're driving 55 miles an hour? Boy, you just, oh, mercy. You know, it's that thing inside of you that doesn't want to get caught. And that's what he says here in verses 11 and 12. You know, I got smooth skin. Esau's a old hairy outdoor type fella. And Dad can't see very well, but if he puts his hands on it, he's going to feel it. I don't have any hair on my hands. And he'll know I'm a deceiver. See, he even says that himself. I'll be a deceiver, and the blessing will not come to me. He's not thinking about his mom. He's not thinking about his dad. He's not thinking about his brother. He's thinking about himself. He's thinking about himself. But look, Mom's got a plan. She's got this thing thought out. Let your curse be on me, my son. Did you know that's some of the saddest words in the Bible? Let your curse be on me, my son. In other words, if this fails, I'll take all the blame for it. If this fails, I'll take all the blame. When I was younger, and most of you were younger at one time, all of you were younger at one time. I remember when I was a teenager, you probably do too, and you may have teenagers or teenage grandchildren now, and somebody would come along and say, hey, why don't you go with us? We're going to go over, and you fill in the blank. And you say, oh, I really shouldn't do that. Oh, come on, chicken. You see, there's not anything bad going to happen. I'll take care of it. That's what Rebecca's doing here. She says, oh, if anything bad happens, I'll take the blame. Only obey my voice and go get them for me. She says, you get on down there and get those two little young goats. Don't you worry about all the particulars. I'll take care of that. So he went and he got them and brought them to his mother. And his mother made savory food. Now, obviously, she's as good a cook as Esau was, because she made food that when Isaac ate it here, the food was really good. And it says, such as his father loved. She knew what it took to please him. She had been married to him a long, long time. Then Rebekah took the choice clothes of her elder son Esau, which were with her in the house. Now, I don't know why some of his clothes were there, but they were. He had been married a long time and hadn't lived in that house for a long time. But there are things left over in your houses, I'm sure, that were there for many, many years. Mementos, various things that were there. And so he had some kind of clothing there in their house, and she got it. It would have smelled like him. It would have felt like the texture of the kind of clothing he wore. And she put them on Jacob, her younger son. Now look at the deception gets even deeper here. She put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck, so they would feel hairy. Now, just picture that. That's almost comedic, isn't it? This kind of fair, delicate man, smooth-skinned, and he's sitting there in an old robe that's probably 40 years old. It doesn't fit him. And he's got old bloody goat skins around his neck and on his hands. That's just ridiculous. This deception is so intense that it's almost comical here at this point. And then she gave him the savory food and the bread which she'd prepared in the hand of her son Jacob. So he went to his father and he said, my father. And he said, here am I. Who are you, my son? Now, a little diversion here. In this chapter, many years ago, in this old Bible that I use, I wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the points of deception. The first one we've already read, where Jacob and his mother conceived this plan, and Jacob was a little bit weary of it and went on with it. The second deception is here, the second big lie. Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. Now that's just an out and right lie. Lying to his father. I believe there's a command that God will give at a future time to Moses, and we still have that command today, and it's to honor your father and mother, and it's a really, really important command. And so he is dishonored, even before that command, he's dishonored his family here. He's lied to his father. I've done just as you told me. No, he didn't. He doesn't even know how to hunt. He didn't go out and hunt and kill something and make this food. His mother did it, of course. Please arise, sit, and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. That's the reason for doing this, that he can get the blessing, which is, again, already his. But Isaac said to his son, how is it that you found it so quickly, my son? This old fella can still think, and he's thinking, you hadn't been gone long enough to kill a deer and bring it home and dress it and cook it and bring it in to me. Unless that deer happened to be right outside the camp there or something. How'd that happen? And look at this, the third lie. One of the greatest blasphemies that the human tongue can do is to invoke the name of God for something that would cause you to have gain. He said, because the Lord, did he say my God? He said, no, the Lord, your God, brought it to me. Words are very important in the Bible. He has invoked the name of Jehovah God and said, this is a miracle. He brought it to me. But he didn't say, my God. He said, your God. Now, think forward a little while. This is the man right here that the promise of God, the blessing of God, the Abrahamic covenant is going to be bestowed upon. This is that man. This is that man. His sin is on the same line of David's sin hundreds of years later. This man is filled with deceit. He is a despicable character. Your Lord, your God has brought it to me. So verse 21 says, Isaac said to Jacob, please come near that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. He is questioning this. He really is. When you were a child growing up and your parents asked you about something that you had done and you didn't want to tell them, there was always this little, in their mind, if you told, oh no, I didn't do that. There's in their mind, they thought, yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And this is what we've got here. Esau is not there. This is Jacob there. And Isaac, he suspects something. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, and he felt him, and he said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands, and so he blessed them. And this is the fourth deception or sin in this story. The deception which his mother decided to do has worked because of the hairiness that he felt, even though the voice wasn't the same, and even though the food didn't come at the right time. That tricked him, and he did not recognize him. So look at the latter words of verse 23. So he blessed him. Then he said, are you really my son Esau? And he said, I am. And this is the fifth big deception in this chapter. He said, bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's game, so that my soul may bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Therefore may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you. He's received, as a matter of deceit, the blessing of his father. He tricked his father into blessing him with the blessing that normally a firstborn son would have gotten. Now, it only gets sadder at this point. Now, it happened as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out of the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. And he also had made savory food and brought it to his father, and said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me. The very words that Jacob had said earlier. And his father Isaac said to him, who are you? So he said, I'm your son, your firstborn son, Esau. Now, there's a light going off in his mind. Something has clicked here. Then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, Who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it because you came and I've blessed him. And indeed he shall be blessed. The trickery is unfolded. What a sad thing it is. This probably was one of the lowest points of the life of Isaac right here. To realize that his own son and his own wife have deceived him into this blessing and robbed Esau of the blessing that Isaac thought should have been Esau's. But obviously it was God's plan for it to be upon Jacob. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me also, O my father. I picture in my mind this man of the outdoors, a man's man, a hunter, a fellow that could just live on his own if he had to. And he is just crying his heart out. He is heartbroken because he still thought that his father would give him that blessing, even though he knows he had sold that birthright. And by this time in their life, they're not children anymore. They're grown men. It's obvious that the blessing of God is not going to him because God had decided that already, even before they were born. But he said, Your brother came with deceit and has taken away your blessing. And Esau said, Is he not rightly named Jacob? And there again, that word comes up, supplanter, a deceitful, a heel grabber, this person that is always involved in trickery. Is it not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times, the one time when he took the birthright away when he was hungry, and now this time by deception, having his father give the blessing to Jacob. He took away my birthright, and now he's taken away my blessing. And he said, Have you not reserved a blessing for me? Is there just anything you can give me, Father? And Isaac answered, and he said to Esau, Indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. In other words, he's going on. He's going to have everything. He's going on. He's going to get the bulk of everything there is. His support has been provided for. What shall I do now for you, my son? I mean, Isaac's just kind of at his wit's end. I don't have anything else to give. But Esau comes up with something. Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and he wept. And Isaac answered him and said, Behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven from above. Now that's part of what his blessing was to Jacob. But look at verse 40. By the sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. And if God allows us to keep studying in the book of Genesis, we'll see how that takes place many years from this time. But there's still things to come between these 2 boys. Now, let's go ahead a little further and see if we can finish this chapter. There's a word in verse 40 that's I think one of the worst words in our language. I was taught as a child never to use this word. To me, it became almost like a curse word, and every time I hear someone use it today, even in a flippant or absent-minded way, it kind of stings in my heart. I was taught as a child the only thing you should hate is sin. Nothing else is to be hated. So Esau hated Jacob. What did Jesus say about when you have that thought in your heart? It's the same as murder, isn't it? In other words, if he could have gotten a hold of him, he'd have killed him. The hatred in his heart would drive him to try to have a desire to kill his own brother. He hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, this is what Jesus was talking about. in the Sermon on the Mount right here. He said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand, then I will kill my brother Jacob. Willful intent to get rid of his brother is in his heart. And that eats on him for years and years and years. And you go back to verse 40, by the sword you shall live. His life was filled with turmoil. And the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. Now she's got some, who was it in that old TV show? You got some splaining to do. Ricky, wasn't it? And Lucy and Ricky. You got some splaining to do, Lucy. Well, Rebekah, you got some splaining to do here. She sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, surely your brother Esau comforts himself concerning you by intending to kill you. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise, flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Now, she says that one son is intending to kill the other, and in order for her to protect this child, this son that she so dearly loves, she wants him to go away. She's sending him away. Stay with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away. Now, Haran was a long way away. It's in Mesopotamia. If you look at your Bible maps, that they would have to go way north, a couple of 100 miles, into what we would call Syria today, nearly to where Turkey is, and then turn the corner to that Tigris-Euphrates valley there, and that's where Haran was. That's where Abraham stopped off on his way to Canaan. So this is not a 1 or 2 or 3 day trip. This is weeks of travel. This is where Eliezer went back to get Rebekah in the first place. This was a big journey. So he's leaving to go there. So stay with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you've done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved also of you both in one day? Now she is speaking in terms of short time, and she does not realize when she says these few words in verses 44 and 45 that 20-something years are going to pass before he's going to come back. He's not going to come back next month or the month after that or the month after that. And Esau's not going to hang around to wait for him to come back. He's going to go out and conquer other lands and grow a people and carry on with his life. Verse 46, and Rebekah said to Isaac, I'm weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Heth, like those who are the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? So she wants him to go back and get a wife in that land. And he does. And you'll see how that takes place very soon. What an interesting story that is. I like that story because for once he gets tricked. Read ahead if you don't believe me. I like to see the deceiver get deceived. We'll pick up there with chapter 28 the next time we study together, and we'll see one more thing that Esau does down there in verse 6 and following that is so important in this story. Now, how many of you would like to voice a prayer request tonight?